it Act for America. What did we name our organization? Now, I want you loud. What did we name our organization? Act for America. Now is our time. If it's not us, then who? If it's not now, then when? We are fighting for the soul of our country. Just imagine the alternative if President Trump does not get reelected. Just imagine. Let that light a fire under you. Our founding fathers gave up everything, and most of them died broke to give us the freedoms that we have today. The least we can do is protect and preserve those freedoms that they created for generations to come. We owe it to them, and we owe it to our children. And I cannot end my presentation without asking every military personnel in this room and every veteran to stand up and be recognized and remain standing after the applause. I have a message for you. I saw a lot of them sit down. They are so humble. They stand up. It's like immediately they sit down. Those of you who sat down, our military personnel and our veterans, please stand back up again. Now I have a message for you. I want you to hear it, and I want you to be standing up, every single one of you. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for creating a nation for me where I can come be all I can be as an American. I want to thank you for my freedom, every single freedom I have, my freedom of speech, my freedom of religion, my freedom of expression, and every freedom I have. I know that my freedom is built upon your shoulders and your sacrifice. I want to thank you for every night you slept away from home. I want to thank you for every meal you missed. I want to thank you for every family occasion you missed. I want to thank you for every holiday you slept in a ditch while your family was alone celebrating the holiday. You are not only my heroes. You are the heroes of millions of Americans who are unable to stand before you here today, and thank you. On their behalf, I thank you. On behalf of millions of people around the globe who are still living under tyranny, who wish they had a military like you to go spread freedom of justice, on their behalf, I thank you. They'll never have an opportunity to thank you in person. And I vow to you that I am building an organization with Act for America that will always honor you, that will always praise you, that will always lift you up in prayers, that will always sing about your accomplishment to our future generation of brats who don't know where their freedom comes from. Fight for you and for our law enforcement and for every person protecting this country and our border agents who are not here right now. Thank you. May God bless you one and all, and may God bless the United States of America. May we all honor the legacy of our founding father, and may we win this war against those who want to destroy America. Thank you for having me.
You did not have to sit down. I was actually going to give you a stretch break. So now don't you, I'll do it if you promise not to leave. All right? No leaving. Let's all just stand up, stretch a little bit, get friendly with your neighbor. Actually, let's do this like in church. Turn to your neighbor and greet them in the name of God. You have another lost credit card. As soon as we're finished with it, we'll let you know who you are. But next week, the Democrats are going to do debate on CNN. They refuse to do a debate on Fox because they're too biased. Let's go on CNN instead. We picked up this video clip to show you a picture of it from the last debate. You might want to take a look at this. She says, "Hey Joe, can you get me one of those $50,000 a month jobs too?" And just tell them I'm part Indian. All right, that's something you won't see on CNN, as well as any hard questions. Questions like, is racism a good thing or a bad thing? Why do you think President Trump is so evil? That's what you'll hear on CNN. So, hey, what? We'll give you the wrap up. We'll watch it so you don't have to. Our next speaker is serving his 8th term in the United States House of Representatives from the great state of Texas. He's a tireless advocate on the House floor all over East Texas and the nation. National and international media on many critical issues and values voters care about, such as the preservation of the U.S. constitutional authority, the freedoms of religion, speech, and states' rights, Second Amendment rights, and the fight against terror. He serves on the House Judiciary Committee, standing up to attacks from the left against the U.S. Constitution. We're always delighted to have him come to the Values Voter Summit to speak. So would you join me now in welcoming Congressman Louis Gohmert?
I love innovation. Thank you. I'm always concerned nobody's going to clap when I finish, so if they do it before I start, just great. It is so good to be here with you. And if you wonder about whether or not I have courage, I'm following Brigitte. But I am in Congress, and I didn't expect to be in Congress long. We're in a fight for our country. And a reporter asked, well, how long do you plan on running? And I said, oh no, I didn't expect to be here this long, but I have the feeling, like I did once at a horror movie, I was sorry I came, but I can't leave till I see how it comes out. We've got a lot of younger members now, wonderful, especially if they've got courage, but we still have some of the old geezers. I was told one of our older members said to another one, I know it's none of my business, but you got a suppository sticking out of your right ear. And he said, oh my goodness, that tells me what I did with my hearing aid. I go back to 1797. By the way, there is no one, despite what the mean-spirited media may say, there is no one that meant more to our freedom and our country's history than George Washington. And by the way, if you're ever tempted to say, well, if you're on the no-fly list, you shouldn't be able to buy a gun. We in Congress have asked the Obama administration repeatedly, how do you get on the no-fly list? They said, we can't tell you. Well, how do you get off the no-fly list when you shouldn't be on there? We can't tell you that either. Really? So one of the greatest patriots in the country, Major General Vernon Lewis, has been on the no-fly list, and then we have to fight, and they get him off, and then he appears again. Yeah, we don't need that kind of rule. We've already got one star chamber trying to do impeachment and absentia, but we don't need a star chamber deciding who can have a gun, because the Second Amendment makes that pretty clear. Became our second president, John Adams. In 1797, he made clear when he said, this Constitution was meant for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate for the governing of any other. Now, we've gotten away from teaching morality, right and wrong. Well, maybe if it feels good, do it. Maybe it's okay for you and not somebody else. No, there were 10 good commandments that used to hang in schools around the country, in courthouses. And then we had an oligarchy, we sometimes call the Supreme Court, that got involved and said, we don't care what our history is. We don't care about not establishing a religion in the first part of the First Amendment. We're going to establish secularism as our religion. And they got involved, and we have seen morality failing to be taught because the Supreme Court stepped in and said, you can't teach that. That's from the Bible. We had a great awakening, 1730s, 1740s. And it led to this yearn for freedom that resulted in our revolution. And I knew I was going to the Army after I finished A&M. I had an Army scholarship. I majored in what I loved, and that was history. And historically, well, historians have debated what made the big difference between the American Revolution and the French Revolution. They were wanting freedom, and I think it's best characterized by the historians that say in the United States, the revolution was about liberty. It was about freedom. In France, unfortunately, the revolution became about revenge. That's why so many heads were chopped off. And we have got people who think that they are the most moral brokers in America. They are the greatest moral arbiters in America. And all they can do is lash around like the SPLC and throw hatred all around. And nobody knows that better than the Family Research Council and the shooter that was inspired by the SPLC. And the hate continues. And I know Jesus said, they're going to hate you. Remember, they hated me first. But we have lived in a bubble in the United States where you weren't discriminated against for being a Christian. And that led to us being, I believe, the greatest country in the history of the world. More opportunities, more freedoms, more assets. So why was that? I don't know. God has his reasons. But we have been richly blessed, and it was fine that everybody didn't believe that. They were able to be blessed because the majority of this country did believe in God and did believe in the Ten Commandments and did believe those things that were biblical. And things have changed. And we are in danger of losing it all because enough people have not stood up and fought for what we believe in. Now, understand, as a Christian, I'm supposed to turn the other cheek. I am supposed to love my enemies and love my neighbors. In fact, the two most important laws, love God, love your neighbor. But when you're acting in a government role, Romans 13 applies. If you do evil, be afraid, because God doesn't give the government the sword in vain. And every American has a role in their government. To vote, to run for office, to support others, to fire them when they're not doing their job, to sit on jury duty. You are part of the government. When you're acting in that government role, you don't turn the other cheek. If you're sitting on a jury, I was a felony judge, you don't turn the other cheek. You're there for a purpose to save freedom for everybody else. And you have an extra burden. Everybody in America, every American citizen has that burden, has that responsibility. And we need to have more people. And I know I'm not preaching to the choir, I'm preaching to the preachers here. But we have got to take that mantle on. 1892, 15 pages, the U.S. Supreme Court was taking up this issue, are we a Christian nation or not? And after pages of references, they said, they came to this quote, these and many other matters which might be noticed add a volume of unofficial declaration of mass organic utterances that this is a Christian nation. It didn't mean everybody was a Christian, but it meant a majority was. And we had that kind of biblical morality that we had founders fight for. And Lincoln, his speech at Gettysburg is so profound. His second inaugural is so profound. Both read from the same Bible, both pray to the same God. Now, if you say that, you will be condemned as being a hater. Like Brigitte, for heaven's sake, we have got to help identify the real haters in America. They don't understand that. They think evangelical Christians, some of them on the commission, think that that's the biggest hate group threat. No. How you could be so perverse as to take the one religion that is based more on love than any other religion is absurd. And it's more of the false media matters that have been coming out. It's not true. Christianity boiled down to this. God so loved the world, he gave his son. His son so loved the world, he gave his life. That's a lot of love. And we have been the beneficiary. And if you don't believe, that's fine. This is America. But where a majority had those same feelings of morality and understanding, and like C.S. Lewis said, some have a better sense of fairness than others. But just because some come closer to hitting a musical note than others who don't, doesn't mean the music doesn't exist. It means some come closer to hitting the true mark than others. And that's what we need to understand. So it took principle, it took courage to get us this country with more freedom than any other in history, but those have been taken away. Act for America. We need to help make clear to everybody, if you're going to be intimidated and come after a group that loves this country, like Act for America and Brigitte, she came from Lebanon. I'm amazed how many people come from other countries. They knew real oppression. And they're some of the best Americans we've got. We had a case before the Supreme Court involving the Harris Funeral Home. Y'all familiar with that? Transgender person ends up being let go because he was violating their policies. This was before the Supreme Court. And understand what's at stake here. Judge Gorsuch understood. Judge Gorsuch asked this question. He says, at the end of the day, should he or she take into consideration the massive social upheaval that would be entailed in such a decision and forcing people to recognize someone for being the sex that they say they are at that moment? Anyway, he says that is more appropriate for a legislative than judicial function. Employers, the government, their amici argue that the plaintiff's reading of Title VII would so expand the concept of sex that employers would not know how to comply and courts would not know how to enforce it. And that's what the left wants. They want such obscurity, right and wrong, that it will create chaos, and they think out of chaos will come these great dictators. And I'll tell you how bad education has gotten. We have billionaires in this country that are so miseducated and so stupid about history, they think by giving hundreds of millions of dollars to help make us a socialist, progressive, communist country, they'll be part of that thin veneer in the ruling class, whether it's socialism, communism. There's no middle class there. You have that little group of leaders, and then you have everybody else. They think they're going to be in there. They have not learned enough history to know if they get us all the way to pure socialism, communism, progressivism, their money will be taken, and they will either go to a gulag or they'll be killed. And they hadn't figured that out. If the plaintiffs win this case before the Supreme Court, that first part of the First Amendment will be gone. You will not have the freedom to believe what Moses and Jesus said about sexuality. That will be gone. You will be deemed a hater. You will be deemed to be mean-spirited when you have nothing but love for your fellow man, but you know right and wrong. You've learned that. So if you're going to understand what's happening in the U.S., you need to understand what more brilliant people have said about socialism, progressivism, communism. Dostoevsky said the problem of communism is not an economic problem. The problem of communism, Dostoevsky said, and he should know, the problem of communism is the problem of atheism. And I was an exchange student in the Soviet Union the summer before my junior year in college, and they were overtly hostile to Christianity. In fact, they took that gorgeous cathedral in Leningrad, really St. Petersburg, and turned it into a museum of atheism and evolution. I nearly threw up when I went into that. But there was one allowed seminary at a place called Zagorsk, a good bit out from Moscow. And going out there, right as you turn into this walled community, the seminary, there was a multi-story building, and it had Lenin's face on it. And above his face said Lenin, and then below it said Znami. Lenin is with us. So you may be going into this Christian enclave, but remember, it's Lenin, rubber ear and all. Lenin is with us. Now that's where it goes if the left get what they want. This little experiment in self-government will be gone. Whittaker Chambers converted from communism and helping the Soviet Union to Christianity and to being a lover of liberty. And he testified against Alger Hiss. Chambers said the communist vision, and I'm quoting, is the vision of man's mind displacing God as the creative intelligence of the world. It's popular to call it a crisis of the Western world. It is, in fact, a crisis of the whole world. Communism is itself a symptom and irritant of that crisis. So we are near the end of the road of no return. There's still time to get back on track, but not a lot of time. If the election had gone the other way in 2016, we were done. If the election in 2020 goes the wrong way, we're done. We'll keep fighting. People have said, yeah, you've been one of the last ones at the Alamo, probably. But it's a cause worth fighting for. Now, if hate crime legislation is not changed, I said it back when it was being brought up. If this passes, it will be used to prosecute Christian ministers for reading from the Bible. And they thought I was talking about homosexuality. I didn't want to give them any ideas, but what I had in my mind back then was someday they're going to come after Christians for saying, Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one goes to the Father but by me. That's hateful. That's mean-spirited. And now we've heard Bernie Sanders get up to Russ Vaught in his confirmation hearing for being a Christian and believing what Jesus said. We've had Dianne Feinstein go after what I'm hoping will be the next Supreme Court justice. The demagoguery was deep with her, apparently. But this is a battle for our nation's freedom. And if we want to continue to be blessed, we're going to have to live blessed lives. But we've got to do as those who went before us did, and that's fight for what they gave us. Yeah, we're endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. But like any inheritance, if you're not willing to fight for what your parents are leaving you, somebody will always take it away if you're not willing to protect what you've been given. So let me just close with this. As a judge, it always broke my heart to see children suffer for the sins of their parents. Every day in America, children are separated from their parents. This is not a new concept. When a warrant is issued, first an adult is arrested, not a child. The children are left separated from their parents when they go to jail. It happens every day. But we know from history, we know from the Bible, if we rise up and defend our freedom, future generations will look back at us and call us blessed. But I'm telling you, we're at a place, if we don't fight and fight hard for those freedoms, and we continue into this morass of immorality, they are not going to rise up and call us blessed. And I don't want to think about the words they'll be using to refer to our generation. This is a gift, the greatest God has ever allowed a people to have for a country. And we cannot let this gift go without a fight for truth, for justice, and the American way, which is love your neighbor, but fight to keep them from taking away your rights. God bless you.
There's only one of them, and boy, are the liberals glad of that. What a great man of God. We are absolutely living in a different day and age. I've been following politics probably for at least 40 years. Never in my days have I seen anything like what we're seeing played out today. Especially as it relates to this whole issue of transgender. And have you ever noticed that the same people that tell us global warming is settled science are the same group of people that are telling us sex at birth? Now that's not settled science. This is what we're dealing with on a regular basis. Can you imagine the amount of science and biology and medicine, not to mention common sense, the left has to step over to make transgenderism public policy. We can't teach our children about intelligent design because that's not fact-based, but we will teach our little children that you can be a boy or you can be a girl, it's your choice. At 7 years old, I wanted to be a fire truck. So we need to talk about it, and we put together a very impressive panel to do just that. But first, let's all take a look at the screens for a little background on this issue.
Was edged out of the top 6 spots, in part by 2 transgender runners. Professor at Shawnee State University in Ohio is suing the school after being punished for refusing to use a student's preferred gender pronoun.
please welcome our panel and our moderator, Family Research Council's Director of Partnerships and Coalitions, Sarah Perry.
Well, that was not an easy video to watch, particularly for those of you who have kids, because we are, as Gil said, living in a very different age. We do not say the hard things. They will get harder. So, we're going to talk about the issue of transgenderism and separate fact from fiction. 20 years ago, none of us would have believed that the word sex in federal legislation would have been open to interpretation. We couldn't have imagined that the New York City Human Rights Commission would have identified 31 genders for the legal protection. We might not have thought that a teacher in Virginia would have been fired for refusing to use nonsensical pronouns for a trans-identifying student, and we never would have believed that a mother in New Jersey would have been powerless to stop a university clinic from prescribing and securing life-altering treatments for her teenager suddenly identifying as transgender. That we even need today's discussion is a symptom of the increasing sexualization and medicalization of this nation's kids, desperate to create identities free of constraints and address their own internal brokenness. Children and adults are willing to eschew science in light of fantasy while ignoring their underlying psychological, neurological, or developmental conditions. Just this year, the CDC reported that a full 2% of all high school kids now identify as trans. My three guests understand this rapid expansion of the transgender contagion full well, and I am so excited to introduce them to you. I'll give you a little introduction, and then I'm going to let them tell their stories before we have a conversation. Lynn Meager is an advocate for parents of kids with rapid onset gender dysphoria. She is a member of the bipartisan Hands Across the Aisle Coalition, which is dedicated to protecting the legal rights of women and girls. She was profiled by the Christian Post a few months ago with a story entitled, "I've lost 2 kids to the trans cult. I want them back." She is fighting drag queen story hours at public libraries across the coast, and she has helped start the Ask Moms group on Facebook to educate and inform everyday parents in how to fight the gender identity onslaught.